A foster child refused to steal, passing a secret test by a wealthy couple. These words, etched in faded ink on the worn journal Elijah clutched to his chest, were the only clues to his past, to the truth of how he'd found himself here, in his 15th foster home in 12 years. The pages inside remained blank, save for that single sentence on the first page. A mystery, a fragment of who he was, or perhaps who he was meant to become. The December wind howled through the cracks of the group home's ancient windows, but the chill Elijah felt ran much deeper than temperature. 17 years old, with dark, unruly hair that fell across watchful eyes, he sat cross-legged on his narrow bed, surrounded by everything he owned in this world. 3 threadbare t-shirts, a pair of jeans with patches on both knees, a backpack missing one strap, and the journal. Miss Pearson, the group home director, appeared in his doorway, her thin frame casting a long shadow across the scuffed floor. "The Montgomerys will be here in 20 minutes, Elijah. Please make yourself presentable." Her voice held no cruelty, just the tired resignation of someone who had seen too many children come and go. Elijah didn't respond. What was the point? The Montgomerys would be like all the others, well-intentioned people who would realize within weeks that a boy with his history was too much work, too damaged, too quiet, too something. Still, he washed his face, combed his hair with his fingers, and put on his least worn shirt. Old habits, self-preservation. Don't give them a reason to send you back before you even arrive. When the doorbell rang downstairs, Elijah's stomach tightened. He touched the journal once more before slipping it into his backpack. Whatever happened next, this journal, this one connection to someone who might have once cared enough to write those words, would go with him. The Montgomerys didn't match any of the mental pictures Elijah had constructed on the drive. Richard Montgomery stood tall and lean in a sweater that probably cost more than everything Elijah had ever owned, but his eyes crinkled at the corners with genuine warmth. His wife, Sophia, was petite with honey-colored hair and hands that seemed perpetually in motion, tucking a strand behind her ear, straightening her husband's collar, reaching out to shake Elijah's hand. "It's so wonderful to meet you, Elijah," she said, her voice musical. No pity there, just warmth. Their home was everything the social worker had described and more. Nestled on several acres outside the city, the Montgomery estate resembled something from a magazine, all stone and warm wood and windows that captured the winter sunlight. Inside, high ceilings arched overhead, but despite its grandeur, the house felt lived in. Books were stacked on coffee tables, a half-finished puzzle sprawled across a side table. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee. "Your room is this way," Richard said, leading Elijah up a curved staircase. "We hope you'll be comfortable here." The bedroom was larger than any Elijah had ever had to himself. A queen-size bed with a navy comforter, a desk by a window overlooking bare winter trees, empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. He set his backpack down with a soft thud that seemed to echo the hollow feeling in his chest. "Too nice, too perfect, too temporary. Dinner's at 6, Sophia said from the doorway. "Take all the time you need to settle in." As soon as they left, Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling slightly. He'd learned long ago not to unpack completely, not to settle in, not to believe. That first week passed in a blur of cautious interactions. The Montgomerys never pushed, never pried. They offered information freely, about themselves, about their work. Richard was an architect. Sophia ran several charitable foundations. About the neighborhood. They asked questions but accepted Elijah's brief answers without pressing for more. At school, Elijah kept to himself, the new kid for the 20-something time. Homework gave him a reason to retreat to his room in the evenings, though Sophia would gently knock around 8 each night, offering hot chocolate or tea. No pressure to come down, but there's a mug waiting if you'd like one. Sometimes he accepted, sometimes he didn't. They never seemed to judge either choice. It was during the 3rd week that things changed. Elijah had been helping Richard organize his home office, a task offered not as a chore, but as a way to earn some spending money. While sorting through a filing cabinet, Elijah's eyes fell on a bank statement casually left on the desk. The figure at the bottom made his breath catch. More zeros than he'd ever seen in one place. Later that evening, as Elijah sat at the dinner table pushing salmon around his plate, Richard cleared his throat. "Sophia and I have to attend a charity gala this weekend. We'll be gone overnight Saturday. We trust you'll be fine here on your own?" Trust. The word hung in the air between them. Elijah nodded, fork suspended midway to his mouth. They were leaving him alone in their mansion, with all their valuables, their wealth. The knot in his stomach tightened. Saturday afternoon, he watched from his bedroom window as their sleek car disappeared down the winding driveway. The house felt different with them gone. Larger, emptier, filled with expensive things that didn't belong to him. Things that could change his life if he took them. Elijah wandered through the silent rooms, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. In Richard's office, the filing cabinet drawer remained slightly open. Inside, an envelope peeked out, the same one he'd seen earlier that week. He knew what it contained. Money. Opportunity. Escape. His heart pounded as his fingers brushed against the envelope's edge. How easy it would be. Take the money. Disappear. Start over somewhere no one knew him, where the weight of being a throwaway kid didn't press down on his shoulders every day. His hand trembled as he slid the envelope out. $20,000. Enough to survive for months, maybe a year if he was careful. No one would know until morning. He'd be long gone by then. But as he stood there, envelope in hand, something else trembled within him. Not fear, but the faint echo of those words from his journal. A foster child refused to steal. Was this a moment that would define him? Or was it a moment already written somewhere, waiting for him to discover its meaning? Elijah slid the envelope back into the filing cabinet, closing the drawer with a resolute click. His hands still shook, but now with the force of the decision, not the temptation. He returned to his room, pulled out his journal, and for the first time since receiving it, wrote beneath that mysterious opening line, "And so did I." Sunday morning, Elijah awoke to the sound of car tires on gravel. He quickly dressed and headed downstairs, finding Richard and Sophia in the kitchen unpacking pastries from a white bakery box. "Kunanam." "Good morning." Sophia smiled. "How was your night alone? Everything okay?" "Fine," Elijah said, reaching for a mug to pour coffee. "Quiet." Richard's eyes met his, searching. "The house is just as we left it?" Something in his tone made Elijah pause. "Yes, everything's fine." Later that afternoon, Richard asked Elijah to join him in his office. Elijah's heart rate quickened as he followed, wondering if somehow they knew he'd considered taking the money, even if he hadn't actually done it. Richard closed the door and gestured for Elijah to sit. "I need to tell you something important," he began, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Sophia and we weren't at a charity gala this weekend." Elijah's mouth went dry. "You weren't?" "No." Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We were at a hotel down the road. We could see the house from our window." Understanding dawned slowly, a cold wave washing over Elijah. "You were watching me," Richard nodded. "We fostered 7 children before you, Elijah. 3 of them stole from us within the first month. 2 more after that. Money, jewelry, once even our car." Elijah's hands curled into fists on his lap. "Just another test. Just another way to prove he wasn't worthy. So you set me up, left money where I'd find it, made sure I knew you were rich, then gave me the opportunity to steal." "Yes," Richard admitted, no trace of apology in his voice. "We did." The familiar ache of betrayal spread through Elijah's chest. "And now what? You're satisfied I passed your little test? I get to stay until you find some other reason to send me back?" Richard shook his head slowly. "That's not it at all." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "This is what we want to talk to you about." Elijah stared at the folder, making no move to take it. His throat burned with unshed tears, not of sadness but of anger. He should have known, should have expected this. "Please," Richard said softly. "Open it." With reluctant fingers, Elijah flipped open the folder. Inside were legal documents, the words "petition for adoption," visible at the top of the first page. His vision blurred. "We never intended to foster you temporarily, Elijah," Richard said quietly. "From the moment we read your file, we wanted to adopt you. But we had to be sure that you wouldn't take advantage, that you understood the value of trust. You were testing me because you want to adopt me?" Elijah's voice cracked on the final word. "We want to be your family," Richard confirmed. "Permanently, legally, if that's what you want too." Elijah's fingers traced the edge of the adoption papers, unable to form words around the lump in his throat. The door opened then, and Sophia entered, her eyes gentle as they met his. "We should have told you from the beginning," she said, sitting beside him. "But we've been hurt before. We needed to know your character when no one was watching." "My character," Elijah repeated, the word hollow on his tongue. "You know nothing about me, about where I came from. What I've done." Sophia reached for his hand, her touch warm against his cold fingers. "We know enough. We know you had every reason and opportunity to take advantage of us, and you didn't. That tells us everything we need to know about who you are at your core. You don't know why I didn't take the money, Elijah whispered. Why didn't you? Richard asked. Elijah hesitated, then reached for his backpack beside the chair. He pulled out the journal and opened it to the first page, showing them the words that had guided him without his understanding why. A foster child refused to steal, passing a secret test by a wealthy couple. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Richard leaned forward, eyes wide. Where did you get this? Richard asked, voice barely audible. It was with me when I entered the system. My only possession, Elijah explained. I've never known what it meant, just that it was important somehow. Connected to me. With trembling hands, Richard took the journal, examining it as if it were made of glass. This handwriting, he said, looking up at Sophia, whose eyes had filled with tears. It's Anna's. Who's Anna? Elijah asked. Sophia wiped at her cheeks. Anna was my sister. She died 15 years ago. She ... She had a baby boy she had to give up for adoption just before she passed. The adoption was closed. We tried for years to find her son, but the records were sealed. The room seemed to tilt beneath Elijah's feet. You think I don't know, Sophia whispered. But Anna always wrote her as with that little curl. And these words, this is exactly the kind of message she would leave. She loved stories, loved the idea that life followed narrative patterns. We need to get a DNA test, Richard said, his normally steady voice wavering. But Elijah, if this is true, if you're Anna's son, then finding you wasn't random at all. Your file just appeared in our social worker's stack. Sophia explained. We've been searching for 15 years and suddenly there you were. Elijah's heart pounded against his ribs. But even if I'm not, even if it's just a coincidence, the adoption offer stands, Richard said firmly. DNA or no DNA, you passed a test we set, but more importantly, you've passed every test of character since you arrived. You're the son we've been waiting for. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, DNA tests, and long conversations that stretched late into the night. Elijah learned about Anna, his mother, who had been barely 20 when she had him, already sick with the cancer that would take her life months later. He learned how she had written dozens of letters to her unborn child, letters the adoption agency was supposed to pass on, but never did. The DNA test confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. Elijah was Anna's son, Sophia's nephew by blood, but something more profound in the ways that truly mattered. On a crisp spring morning, 6 months after Elijah had first arrived at the Montgomery home, they stood together in a courtroom, Richard's hand steady on Elijah's shoulder, as a judge made official what their hearts had already decided. Elijah Montgomery. A name, a belonging, a truth. That evening, as the three of them sat on the back porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sophia handed Elijah a leather-bound box. These belong to your mother. We've been saving them for you. Inside were photographs, letters, a silver locket with a tiny picture of Anna inside. And at the bottom, a second journal, its pages filled with Anna's distinctive handwriting. She wrote stories, Sophia explained. Hundreds of them. Some she published, others she kept private. She believed that writing a story could somehow call it into existence, that the universe listened to the narratives we created. Elijah opened the journal to a random page, where a story beginning caught his eye. A foster child refused to steal, passing a secret test by a wealthy couple. And in that moment of choice, he found his way home to the family who had been searching for him all along. His breath caught. The story continued for pages, describing with uncanny accuracy the very journey he had lived, a path written 15 years before he walked it. She wrote your way home, Richard said softly. Somehow she knew. Elijah traced his mother's words with his fingertip, feeling the indentations her pen had made on the paper. Words that had waited for him, words that had guided him without his knowing. That night, in his room, his permanent room, Elijah opened his own journal again. Beneath his earlier entry, he wrote, "And in refusing to steal, I found more than integrity. I found my way back to where I was always meant to be." The next morning, Elijah woke to sunlight streaming through his window. For the first time in his memory, he felt no urge to protect himself from inevitable disappointment. No need to keep his heart walled off from connection. The weight of temporariness had lifted, replaced by something he was still learning to name: belonging. In Richard's office, with permission this time, he looked through old photo albums. There was his mother at Elijah's age, the resemblance so striking it took his breath away. There were Richard and Sophia on their wedding day, young and radiant. And there at the back of one album was a photograph of a newborn baby, him, cradled briefly in Anna's arms before they were separated. "She loved you every second she had with you," Sophia said from the doorway, watching him with gentle eyes. "And she made us promise to find you someday." "Why didn't she keep me?" Elijah asked, the question that had haunted him for years finally finding voice. "If she loved me so much?" Sophia crossed the room and sat beside him, her shoulder warm against his. "She was very sick, already in hospice when you were born. She knew she only had weeks left, and she wanted you to have parents who could be there for all your birthdays, all your firsts." She paused, fighting for composure. What she didn't know was that the adoption would go wrong, that you'd end up in foster care instead of with a permanent family. "But I found my way here anyway," Elijah said. "Because of her words. Because of you," Sophia corrected. "Because when faced with a choice between what was easy and what was right, you chose right. Anna's journal may have guided you, but you made that choice yourself." Summer came, bringing with it college applications, driving lessons with Richard, and long evenings on the porch swing with Sophia, learning family recipes and histories. The Montgomery house transformed too. Elijah's touch evident in the books that now filled his shelves, the artwork he'd chosen for his walls, the photographs where he stood between Richard and Sophia, their arms wrapped around each other, smiles unguarded. On the anniversary of the day he'd chosen not to steal, the day that had changed everything, Richard and Sophia presented him with a gift. A new journal, its cover matched to his mother's, his name embossed in gold on the front. "For your story," Richard said, "whatever you choose to write next." That night, Elijah sat at his desk beside the window, pen hovering over the first blank page. Outside, stars punctuated the darkness, reminding him of all the nights he'd lain awake in foster homes and group facilities, searching the same sky for answers. He began to write. Once, words written by a dying mother found their way to her lost son, guiding him home through an impossible labyrinth of chance and choice. This is what happens next. His pen moved steadily now, writing not just what had been, but what could be. Like his mother, he would dare to believe that some stories were meant to find their way into reality, that some endings could be rewritten into beginnings. And as the night deepened around the house where he was no longer a visitor but a son, Elijah wrote himself forward into a future where belonging was not temporary but eternal, where love was not conditional but complete, where a foster child who refused to steal had found his way home at last.